Hello, this is Mike Bithell, creator of Thomas Was Alone and John Wick Hex, and you're listening to the Xbox Expansion Pass.
Welcome one, welcome all to episode 80 of the Xbox Expansion Pass, recorded on Sunday, May 2nd, 2021. I am your host, Luke Lohr, the Insipid Ghost. In this episode, I'm joined by Douglas Bogart and Josh Fairhurst, the founders of Limited Run Games, to discuss their vision on keeping physical games alive in a digital space and just what their future holds for Xbox gamers going forward. Microsoft also posted record numbers in quarter 3 and is looking to update their policies in the PC space. That and more coming up. Enjoy. Yet another week of gaming is upon us and behind us. Welcome to XEP, discussing all things in the gamerverse as they pertain to the Xbox ecosystem. And as I am wont to do each and every week, I like to start the show by offering words of kindness to those who have made my gaming week better. And this week, the words of kindness go to Angela, aka Phasma from Seasoned Gaming, for joining my crew in Sea of Thieves just a few weeks ago. In just her second time ever playing Sea of Thieves, she joined us in what would effectively be endgame raid content as we did our first Athena Fort or Fort of Fortune. It was an absolute blast, and Angela rocked her role, keeping the ship repaired, going onto the island, taking out skellies, taking on bosses, learning the ways of the seas. It was an absolute blast, and it's always a pleasure when you get to welcome people into a gaming space that might be new to them, but is one that you hold dear. And of course, Sea of Thieves is an evergreen title for me. It's one I go back to with regularity, and it was just an absolute pleasure to get to introduce Angela to that. It was just such a great time there. And speaking of Sea of Thieves, I am loving Season 2. It is an absolute blast. I keep my ship going alive and going strong, doing all types of missions out there, and I keep listening to Keelhauled podcast to keep me going when I'm not playing. It's a good time, guys, and I love when we all have these evergreen titles, whether it's Call of Duty or Destiny, Outriders, whatever it is, that just you go back to, and it's kind of like, it's among your daily games. Those are just feel-good games for me, and right now Sea of Thieves and Fortnite are both doing that for me, and it's funny, because I'm out there always playing these niche titles, but I always go back to just a few games to just keep them going. And recently Xbox had a feature where they rekindled a feature that was disappeared for just a little bit of time, where you can see your most played games on your system. And Halo Wars 2 is up there in like the 30 some odd days for me, but Sea of Thieves is right behind it with like 24, 25 days played in that game. And it's kind of neat to have that kind of, mini badge of honor. And without a doubt, 2020 was a year that saw many of my games grow in times played, and more games played probably ever than I ever have before in a year span, thanks to being at home so much. But what a joy it is. So anywho, shout out to Angela, shout out to Keelhauled podcast as well with Captain Logan. You guys have been making my gaming weeks better and more awesome. Let's get to some news. Well, first up on the docket this week, Microsoft posted its best third quarter ever, and Bethesda likely played a big factor in that. And this is news that's coinciding with the fact that PlayStation 5s are outselling and outpacing PlayStation 4s, Sony doing an incredible job on their front. So to get Sony news that was so positive, with so many units sold, particularly during a pandemic, was incredible. And to find out that they are thriving, all the while Microsoft is also thriving and measuring numbers in a different but still relevant way, was really cool. To have their best third quarter ever, Microsoft must be feeling good, and it looks like Bethesda likely played a big part of that growth. A lot of exciting stuff here. I'm going to read a few notes from Rebecca Valentine over at IGN's article. Of course, she's been on this show, oddly enough, which is really cool. Rebecca, an amazing person. Used to be with GameIndustry.biz, now over there at IGN. I plucked some elements from her story, some of the stuff with numbers that I'll read to you guys, and we'll look at just what that means. Microsoft reported revenue was up 50% year over year, jumping from $2.35 billion in the same period last year to now $3.53 billion. Goodness gracious. They have to be smiling at that, particularly given that they launched 2 new consoles, and that can be a rather expensive endeavor. Moreover, in getting those consoles made, they were doing so during a chip shortage and all the while acquiring things. That said, Xbox content and services revenue, and this is what you would think of as Game Pass and Xbox Live Gold, not necessarily Xbox Network, as it were, now that they've tried to distinguish between the two, and this is probably the first time that I've understood why they wanted to say the difference, at least in news reporting elements. But Xbox content and services rose from $739 million, or 34% of Microsoft's attributes, and that just rose quite a bit up there, both in first and third-party software sold, as well as Game Pass revenue. And continued evidence, I suppose, that Game Pass does not hurt sales. And I was thinking about that conversation the other day. Outriders is a huge success in launching into Game Pass. A lot of mixed reception on the game. I had a blast with my 35 or so hours with it, and I'm kind of done with it now, if I'm being honest with you. I don't really see myself going back too much, but 35 hours for the cost of my subscription that I use all the time, it was just an absolute joy. I would have been, I think, frustrated, maybe frustrated if I'd spent $60 at this point. Some people will probably be frustrated if they spent $70 on the PlayStation side, and they only got 10-15 hours. But for me, 35 hours would have been a success, I think, for sure. But to have to not spend that money and still get that time is pretty cool. But bottom line, revenue up all the way over there. I'm just thrilled to see that happening, because when you see games launching into Game Pass being successful, that bodes well for the future and seeing other big titles go forward. I know guest host Sean Capri and I speculated the possibilities of perhaps Mass Effect Legendary Edition making its way to Game Pass at some point, day and date or otherwise. And that's just got to be a great feeling to know that you can still sell a game, sell well, and launch into a subscription service to please those gamers. Thrilled to see that. We mentioned, of course, Bethesda being a possible factor in this. Of course, Microsoft completed their acquisition of ZeniMax, which is Bethesda's parent company, back in March of last year. March of this year. And we're not exactly sure just what the numbers of that revenue would be, because it happened in the final 3 weeks of this reporting quarter. And ZeniMax was not a publicly traded company, so you couldn't really get an idea of those numbers. But speculation in the gaming verse seems to be that Microsoft was comfortably boosted, I suppose, by the revenue of Bethesda games, which doesn't surprise me, I suppose, as I say it out loud. But it's still funny to me because I was never a big Bethesda gamer. So, I'm glad to see that's doing well for them. I mean, of course, I love Doom and the Wolfenstein games. I really did like Rage, oddly enough. Thrilled to see a lot of the Bethesda titles there. That's rehashed, I suppose, points that we've made previously in other episodes. But I'm glad to see that the success and revenue charts climbing for Microsoft and Sony both. It continues to strengthen our medium. I love the competitive aspects of that, because when you have the two companies competing, we get the best bang for our buck. I think it's no doubt at this point that Game Pass is just a huge monumental success, and we talked about numbers about that last week as well. And I'm just thrilled. I really and truly. I suppose there's not a more formal take on it, right? Maybe I could be more serious about it. But the bottom line is I'm just ecstatic. I'm loving the competition. I'm loving the incredible stuff that Sony is putting out. I'm dumbfounded by some of the dumb things Sony's doing. I'm dumbfounded by some of the dumb things that Microsoft does here and there. Although I feel like in the past few months, years, maybe 2 years, they've just been firing on all cylinders. And it's just a matter of time till when those exclusives hit. But if I'm talking to somebody who's thinking about getting a console, and it's going to be their one console going forward, I'm really hard-pressed over which one they should pick. That would be a much more extended conversation now than it ever would have been 3 years ago. So I'm thrilled to see Microsoft having its best quarters, Sony making bank on PlayStation 4 and 5. Just thrilled to see the success in the space, because it only bodes well for my interests going forward. Of course, if we're going to be talking about record sales for Microsoft and doing all this gangbuster revenue number, you'd have to think they would want to pass that on to the gamers and developers in their ecosystems. And indeed, they are doing just that in the PC space. Now, stick with me, console guys, because this is going to be relevant to you too. At least eventually. Microsoft announced in this past week that these changes are only going to affect PC games and not the console games market on the Microsoft Store. Now, what's happening here is that they are going to be reducing the cut they take for selling games on their store, the PC games, mind you, from a 30% standard down to a 12%. And this is a clear bid, as many people are pointing out, to compete with Steam. And certainly the Epic Game Store has to be on their mind as well. Epic, by the way, hemorrhaging money in giving away so many free games. Interesting article not too long ago. They are losing so much money in giving away their free games, but they're making so much money off of Fortnite and other projects that it's really equaling out in their favor overall. So kind of cool to see how Epic is augmenting the use of their Epic Game Store. And you'd have to think Microsoft's working to do almost the same type of thing over in their space. So why are they making these changes? Matt Booty had some comments here, and I'm going to read you a couple quotes. Quote, game developers are at the heart of bringing great games to our players, and we want them to find success on our platforms. A clear, no-strings-attached revenue share means that developers can bring more games and more players to find greater commercial success from doing so, end quote. And what he's really saying in this space is that as they roll out these subscription services like Game Pass, as Game Pass for PC continues to explode and in getting their games, Microsoft games, over onto the Steam space, they're seeing a lot more mind share as a result of that. In the Xbox brand is seeing more mind share in the PC space than it ever has before. And so it's important that they entice developers to bring things specifically to their content. They are finding a lot of success on Steam with their stuff, so people are becoming more aware of them. However, what's fascinating about this is that Steam is still the place to be despite people not being happy with it. Valve still takes 30% cuts on sales from the Steam store, which Microsoft did until just now. And that was reduced to a 25% from 30% if a game hit $10 million in sales, and then 20% for every sale after $50 million. And that probably sounded like a good deal when Valve made it and for developers to get when it first launched out. But it sounds rather archaic, and it pales in comparison to what Epic Game Store was doing and now what Microsoft is doing. This is a lot of pressure to put onto the Steam marketplace. And a recent survey from roughly 3,000 industry professionals, as reported by The Verge, found that a lot of game devs do not think that 30% that revenue cut is fair. And this is all the more pressure into the Steam space. With Epic and Microsoft both now reducing into a 12% platform, really enticing developers to bring content to their platforms, their ecosystems, it continues to push people away from that Steam marketplace. All the while, Microsoft and now Sony, interestingly, are putting their games onto the PC space, day and date free, what have you, blah, blah, blah. Sony not day and date, but to push that mind share of Xbox into the PC space. That's brilliant strategy, I think, in my mind. And there's one other quote from Matt Booty that I'm going to read here to perhaps undercut or rather underscore what we've got going on here. Quote, "We know that we still have a lot of work to do, but based on the response from both PC gamers and PC game developers, we think that we're headed in the right direction for this community and with the investments that we are making. When our work across the entire PC ecosystem has the potential to come together in a way that propels the industry forward and bring great games to more gamers around the world," end quote. He, of course, teasing an impressive 2021 latter half there, probably post E3 stuff, things you hear about at E3. A lot of excitement there in the Xbox game space. Again, this is another bid to build competition within the ecosystem, seeing multiple places have success, find success, and enticing developers to bring their games to the gaming space that Microsoft occupies. if Game Pass for PC continues to grow and sales on Steam continue to grow, that further makes Microsoft a more attractive platform for developers to launch day and date, something they've not necessarily been in recent years. I think it's been long documented that the Microsoft Store is rather behind the times, despite getting some revamps and really coming a long way. I'll grant them that, but it's been rather behind the times, and PC gamers do not tend to gravitate towards that Xbox space per se or quickly. Moreover, I think it will continue to bring people into this day-and-date attitude and idea for Game Pass, which is the right thing to do when you're trying to push a subscription service. I'm wondering, and I would love to be a fly on the wall here, just how many Xbox for PC subscribers there are. Not Ultimate, obviously that wouldn't factor in console there, but just Game Pass for PC, because there are way more, there's just an incredible amount of value for PC gamers in Game Pass for PC. But Microsoft isn't necessarily the most attractive, and Valve is still traditionally the best place with their Steam stuff. So I'm really curious if they are able to, I suppose, bring out that PC marketplace into the Game Pass realm, as it were, on a consistent basis. It's hard to word, I suppose, my thoughts here, other than most PC gamers aren't thinking about Xbox per se. But Microsoft doing a good job at tackling a lot of angles for approach there and gaining that mind share. So I'm curious. I just want to know how much the subscriber base for Game Pass Ultimate is, which includes Game Pass for PC, what the Game Pass for PC subscribers look like versus the overall totals, and that mythical number of just how many people are paying full price for it. To any listener right now, if you ever see Game Pass is on sale, get it on sale and stack it. That's the way to do it right there. Paying full price for Game Pass is still an incredible value, but there's so many ways around that. I absolutely advocate stacking that into a couple years from now with good sales around Black Friday. That's the way to do it right there. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this particular topic. Not too much news this week. We're going to transition into listener mail rather quickly here for this episode and then head over to our limited run games interview that does indeed have quite a bit of, let's just say some good nuggets of news for Xbox gamers.
Hi, this is Jeremy Gritton, art director and story lead for Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and you're listening to the Xbox Expansion Pass.
Listener mail on the week. The first one coming from my buddy Antonio Guillen from the Megadads, Mr. Hypecaster himself. He says, rumor is Battlefield 6 is coming to Game Pass. The only reason I don't believe it is due to Halo Infinite's releasing in the same fall window. What are the chances they risk oversaturating Game Pass with a shooter that might compete with Halo Infinite? Hypecaster, this is a fantastic question, and I have heard that same rumor. In fact, I think a few episodes back we did discuss just what it might be like to see Halo Infinite and Battlefield 6 on Game Pass this fall to compete with the likes of Call of Duty, and I think it's a brilliant strategy to include Battlefield 6 on Game Pass, particularly if you are EA. What they would need to do is learn from their Titanfall mishap, in which they put them too close together. If they're able to get Halo Infinite out in November, then you would think Battlefield 6 needs to be September, and no later than September. Battlefield 6 in September, Halo Infinite in November, a good month and a half period for Battlefield 6 to live and thrive and gain notoriety, and then Halo Infinite is the big November, the big late fall game pre-holiday. You got a lot of good vibes for Game Pass sales headed into the holiday, or people gifting it so that you can get the two best shooters, as it were, coming up. I think that would be a big win for EA and a big win for Xbox. I do think Battlefield 6 should launch into Game Pass, given the I think it's fair to say the struggling Battlefield franchise. Battlefield makes some incredible games. Battlefield 5 is one of my favorite shooters of all time in the online space. That said, people are disenfranchised with it. It really hasn't hit the marks that they wanted it to. It's no longer that Call of Duty killer, that Call of Duty competitor. Call of Duty seems to have really thrived versus Battlefield, which is really weird given all the struggles that Call of Duty is having, and I'm really kind of done. I've always liked the Call of Duty games, and I've actually gone to their defense more than I think I would I would like to admit at this point. However, I'm tired. I'm tired of them. And Battlefield 6 is poised to have a lot of potential to obscure that market if they can get a big audience, and if Microsoft is able to pitch and market well that they have the two biggest shooters of the year on their system in their subscription service, what a big win that would be. So I recognize your concerns with an oversaturation, but I don't see that as relevant. In fact, if you can get Microsoft to poise themselves as a shooter console once again, the way the Xbox 360 was, as well as the RPG console, thanks to their owning every RPG maker there is, I think you got a good recipe there for a good holiday, a good sales beat number there, a lot of mind share for Battlefield 6. And I think EA would be happy with it as well. We'll see. Let me know, listeners, what you guys think. At InsipidGhost on Twitter or InsipidGhost@gmail.com. Thanks for the question, Antonio. You rock, dude. The next question this week comes from my man, Mr. Todd Oxtra, and he asks, will there be a negative impact on games that don't launch day and date onto Game Pass? People may just assume that it's going to come to Game Pass eventually, and these lost sales may never be made up. It's like the PS Plus effect, but it seems to be more amplified now. Great question, Todd, and I'm thinking about that PS Plus effect first. Certainly Fall Guys is the most recent game to launch into PlayStation Plus and do well for sure. There was Destruction All-Stars that I don't think anybody would have in their right mind paid $70 for, and they had an appropriate price adjustment on the game there. They also put it into PlayStation Plus day and date. I thought that was a big win for Destruction All-Stars, which I really did seem to fall short of what a lot of people might have been hoping it would be. Nonetheless, I understand where you're coming from, and when you ask if there's going to be a negative impact to games if they don't launch day and date, I don't think there's going to be an expectation that third-party games need or have to launch day and date into Game Pass. I think there will be a comfortable boost if they do, and we certainly talked about Battlefield 6 in the last question from Antonio. Outriders is a great example of this. That really boosted a lot of the mindshare and sales of Outriders because people were talking about it, people were playing it, and moreover, if you've got so many people playing Outriders on Xbox, there's DLC for that game, and people are buying it, people are exposed to it that never would have before. I don't necessarily think there is an expectation that a third-party game needs to or has to launch day and date into Game Pass. What the numbers are showing, though, is that it is beneficial to the third party to do so. Of course, and obviously, we're getting all first-party Xbox games into Game Pass day and date. That's the big enticing aspect there. But, man, oh man, more and more, it just seems to behoove third-party developers to launch games day and date into Game Pass. What I wonder is if in 2 years' time there's going to be a Game Pass edition that launches day and date into Game Pass that is not necessarily nerfed but may not come with all the bells and whistles that you would get if you purchased the game for $60, $70 outright. I'm curious to see how that goes. But overall, I think the expectation will be more on the side of developers that it's beneficial for them to put games day and date into Game Pass because Microsoft will, of course, spotlight their subscription service in order to boost sales there. Again, that subscription service is on its way to 30 million by the end of 2021. They're at 23 million right now, so it would really make sense for a third-party developer that needs a multiplayer base to subscribe, to drop into that subscription service, as it were. Why would you turn down the option to have 23 million potential players, potential purchasers of DLC and content within a game to really thrive out your online ecosystem there? It just makes sense for developers to do that. But a good question, and one to watch if we're being honest. PlayStation Plus has used this method effectively before, and Game Pass certainly seems to have done the job for games like Outriders and MLB The Show. So a lot of eyes on this going forward, particularly in a year where there's not a lot of AAA games. 2022 will be the real litmus test, and we'll take a look at this question again a year from now. This next question comes from a man, Dano. He says, let's say there is no Game Pass. Which 6 games would you have purchased this year and in the past year that have been added or said they will be added to Game Pass? Reason for 6 is that he guesses that most people buy 2 to 3 games per year. And then quickly responding to Dano was another Twitter user saying, I'm not nice. And he said Outriders, he would have regretted it as interest dropped for him after 2 weeks and MLB The Show, but Outriders was one of the ones he purchased. Everything else he wouldn't have known was good until he tried it on Game Pass first. And that's kind of an understandable answer there from I'm not nice to Dano's question. But Dano, it's a tough one because I would have absolutely bought a ton of the games that I have played that are now on Game Pass that didn't necessarily launch into Game Pass. Zombie Army 4 is one of them. I really like the Rebellion game Zombie Army. To play out. I just like killing zombies. That's now in Game Pass. World War Z, another zombie game in Game Pass as well. Well worth the money there. I believe I bought that one. Easily you could say all the Forzas and things like that, but I'm not sure that truly answers your question. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Star Wars Squadrons are games that I would have purchased as well. Those are now day and date into Game Pass. Of course, I have my Xbox Sea of Thieves type stuff that's in there. Battlefront 2 is in there. I bought that prior to it being into Game Pass as well. There are a ton of games that I own that are now in Game Pass. Second Extinction and Destroy All Humans, of course. Certainly some of them, several of the FIFA games as well. And I'm scrolling through the list here. Goodness, they got Grand Theft Auto back on there. That's nuts. I'm scrolling through the list mainly because games get added and removed so often from Game Pass that it's just nuts. Of course, I own all the Arkham games. Those are always going to be ones that I would purchase regardless of whether or not they're into Game Pass. Carrion and Control are in there. Cyber Shadow is in there. One of my favorite games of last year was Darksiders Genesis. That was a must-buy game for me prior to it being into Game Pass, and I absolutely spent the money on the collector's edition and everything there. Recently downloaded Alien Isolation. That's a game that is in there in Game Pass, and I'm ecstatic to try that one out. I really do like that franchise, I suppose, of Aliens, like the property, the property that is Aliens, the Aliens movies and such, and the old AVP games. Some of them are pretty good. There's that Aliens Colonial Marines, which I purchased for $4 or $5 on like eBay or whatever, because I wanted to try it and see just how bad it was. Oh, that is hot trash in the summer, as my late friend Bobby Pauls once said. Hot trash in the summer. That game is so bad. So bad. But yeah, it's fun when you look at that. When you look at all the games that you would have bought regardless that are in Game Pass that you can now expose your friends to now. Pretty cool thing. And Dano, thanks for the question, because I'm scrolling through here and there's just so much value there. And if I were to add up in Game Pass all the games that I own prior to them being in Game Pass, you're talking hundreds of dollars. There's just so much value in Game Pass's stuff, and it's nuts. It's all every week. Every week it seems like on an Xbox show people are touting Game Pass, and it's not a gimmick. You know what I'm saying? It's not a gimmick. It just seems to be the thing. Great question, Dan. This next question comes from Edward Varnell, and I'll read it in just a moment. I will note for Mr. Edward Varnell at the Retro Code on Twitter, this next upcoming interview is with Limited Run Games, and this interview comes as a result of Edward asking me to ask them why they don't publish on Xbox and a few other aspects about Limited Run Games. And so I shot them an email and set up an interview, and they were willing to let me record it to put onto the show. And that comes from you guys, listeners, people who are willing to write in, be active in it, submit people that they're interested in having on the show, ask me to connect with other people or connect people with me. It's happened rather quietly a couple times where listeners of the show are aware of somebody that they want to be here and have me interview, and they'll connect me with them on the back end, and I really love when that happens. So Edward, thank you so much for the question a few weeks ago about Limited Run. Obviously I didn't answer it when you first asked it, but I kept it banked. I asked them questions related to what you wrote in about Limited Run, and I hope you specifically more than anybody else is able to enjoy that interview, because you're the one that really brought it up, man. On to Edward's question for this week. He says, this is an easy question, so here goes. Should Microsoft push hard with marketing and showing games for the Tokyo Game Show? If not, does that mean that this is an area of business that they don't concern or are bothered with? Well, let's take the second part of that first, actually, Edward. They are absolutely concerned and bothered with getting into the Asian market. Getting into the Japanese market, I think, is more of the end goal and a bit more complicated than, years ago when we might have thought, like, oh, just have a Japanese developer make games. I think they're trying to enter into the Asian market by way of India and Korea using xCloud. They're certainly seeming to talk up and really try to work with a lot of Japanese game developers to enter into that space as well. But it's a matter of mind share at this point. They are an American company trying to take place or make their business in a place where Nintendo and Sony have dominated the first-party space as Japanese companies, and there's a lot of incredible Japanese game makers that seem to spotlight those two particular ecosystems. We have seen a huge influx of support from Xbox for Japanese games into Game Pass, and the easy ones to cite are the Yakuza and Kingdom Hearts games as well as Final Fantasy, but there's a lot more than just those. I'm thinking about Code Vein and Bloodstained and so many others that Microsoft is really trying to support. I think it's just a very long road for Xbox to gain the healthy attention that they want in that place and in that space. As far as pushing the first part of your question, should they push hard with marketing and showing games at the Tokyo Game Show? Only if they're the right fit. And really and truly, I'm not overly concerned or aware of a lot that is a right fit for the Tokyo Game Show. That is just a unique show that I am not overly familiar with myself, but if Microsoft's catalog isn't designed to appeal to that type of gamer or developer, then they should not push hard with it. It is very evident and obvious to anyone that's paying attention that they are working to get into the Japanese market and more widely the Asian markets by way of a few other strategies. If it's not the right time, don't force it. Don't force it. We've seen that happen too often where companies will try to enter into a space or bully their way into a space, but with dollars spent. And that's not necessarily how you build customer loyalty. But good question, Edward. And I appreciate you always writing in, my friend. Alrighty, guys, that is going to do it for my portion of this episode of the Xbox Expansion Pass. Coming up, we're talking to Limited Run Games about their future on Xbox, how their company got started, and just what the physical medium space means in a digital world. A lot of good stuff here in this interview, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Check it out. One thing I was going to ask any listener that's active on Twitter to do. This is a request, obviously. I mean, they're always requests, right? But I would love to start seeing quotes show up from the show, the guests of the show, things that you liked that they said, just kind of in the thread where the tweet goes up. That would help raise attention for the show on Twitter. I put up the pinned tweet every week with the episode and the links for it. But if there are quotes that the guests drop into there that you really like, responding to that with one or two of them will be really cool and a way to help other fans, find out some of the cool things that are happening on XEP, but also none too secretly, it would just show me that more people are listening and making it through those parts of the episode, and that's always fun. All right, guys, that's it for me. You can always tweet your questions at InsipidGhost or email me insipidghost@gmail.com. Enjoy the interview. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care. Alrighty, guys, I am joined now by Douglas Bogart and Josh Fairhurst of Limited Run Games out of near my hometown in Raleigh, North Carolina. Gents, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I am thrilled to have you guys here. You guys, of course, are the founders of Limited Run Games, which specialize in bringing all types of niche games to the physical market that exists in a largely digital world. Can you guys tell me a little bit about how you got started with that program overall with Limited Run?
Yeah, sure. So I have been a game developer since 2008. When I was in my junior year of college, I worked at Epic on as a tester on Gears of War 2. And since then, I've just really been very ingrained in games. When I got out of college, I started my own company developing games. And that was very hard. I built a lot of games for clients. We did work for hire, and eventually the work dried up. But I had an opportunity to release one of the games we had developed physically for the PlayStation Vita, and I took that opportunity because as a developer, having my game physically exist was really appealing because it kept my game relevant. Even if the servers that stored this game were to be shut down or whatever, like the physical copy would always exist. So there would be a way for people to remember that, we made this game, that we existed, whatever. It gave us a legacy. So I took that opportunity to release that game physically, and I brought Douglas on board. He was a tester at my company and a friend that I've had since middle school. So it was a good chance to kind of get to work with my friend and build a company with him. So he came on and he did a lot of early marketing, and it turned out that, there was a lot of people that were really frustrated about digital games. Like they wanted the choice. They weren't necessarily mad that digital existed, but they wanted the choice of having some of these games physically. So when we released our first physical game, it sold out in under 2 hours, and was kind of clear, like, we should help other developers bring their games out physically as well. So from there, we kind of started working with other developers, and we released, I think our first release that wasn't a game that we had developed internally was Oddworld, which was a really big title. So that kind of immediately validated us with a lot of other developers. And from there, we were just kind of releasing anything and everything that we liked. And we kind of have subsequently, in the last 5 years, released about 700 or 800 different physical products, which is kind of insane to think about.
So I'm thinking about the idea that you said you were a game developer back in 2008, and here you are in 2021 running this company. But you guys had started, you were an offshoot, Limited Run rather, is an offshoot of another company, yes?
Yeah, so my game development company, Mighty Rabbit Studios, that's kind of where we started. We're a separate company now, so like Wikipedia is incorrect in saying that, it's a subsidiary. Limited Run's completely separate from Mighty Rabbit, but it did kind of start out from that because, the first 2 titles we released were games that we had developed at Mighty Rabbit.
Very cool. So you guys put this company together. You started off. Tell me about that first year or so when Limited Run was out there. You sold out that first game, but when you're out there making deals, talking to developers about making physical prints, what sort of challenges did you guys run into?
A lot of people thought we weren't real.
Really?
So, yeah, Josh had me go to the PSX show in 2015, and we had only done Breach and Clear at that point, and I would walk around with it, showing developers, like, hey, this is something we can do for you, and they're like, did you make that in your garage? And I was like, no, this is, Sony made this, it's real. And that was the hardest hurdle, and just, we had to really establish trust within the industry, because a lot of people talk to each other, and we were, new to the scene. But I think one of the biggest things that validated us was Oddworld reached out, and they wanted to work with us to do Oddworld New and Tasty. And that being such a legendary company kind of helped establish trust with more companies.
As you kind of bumped elbows with different people, were you finding people or developers that were interested but that you couldn't accommodate, or vice versa, that you were interested in and weren't interested in you?
We definitely had a lot of devs, especially like when we started the company, we made like a wish list of all the people we wanted to work with, and there was definitely a few that initially were like, no, we're not interested in this, either due to you guys being a new company, or we just don't understand the concept. And but over time, we've been able to turn a lot of those people around as we've grown. So that was definitely a hurdle originally, but it's gotten a lot better now.
So I'm thinking about what Josh was saying as far as him being a developer and getting to see that physical game for the first time in that digital world. Were you finding that many developers were having that same fear, Josh, where you made this, you didn't want it to go away? Kind of, this is, if you're in 2008, I mean, Xbox Live Arcade is young and getting a lot of people onto the map. But were you finding that fear happening in other places also?
So we started Limited Run in 2015, so it was kind of more of a 2008 was when I was working on Gears of War 2.
I see. Okay.
2010
Gotcha.
is when I started my development company, and then 2015 is when I did Limited Run. Sorry, I should have established the timeline better. But by 2015, it was kind of clear that a lot of these digital services were going to eventually go down. Like, the original Xbox Live implementation was gone at that point, and there wasn't a whole lot for that, but it was like, DLC for like Knights of the Old Republic was gone. And some of those really early Xbox Live Arcade games like Pac-Man for the original Xbox. Like, nobody really cares. You can play that on a million consoles, but like this stuff was lost. So it was like an early signifier that like digital content will eventually be lost, outside of piracy, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that, but like there are some people who either lack the technical savvy, a technical know-how to like mod a console to download games from these websites, or they just, they have strong opposition to downloading a game illegally, whether or not, there's a legal way to get it. So having these physical games, I think, is very important to a lot of people. On the development side, we saw like, I think the biggest thing that made it attractive to people was more like when your game's digital, it doesn't feel real, especially to like your parents or whatever. Like if you're a developer who's like in their 30s and they have parents who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever, like they're very physical, they're very tangible. Like they think you're basically playing pretend or whatever in your work unless you bring home a physical product that like actually exists. And to a lot of developers, they would say to us like, I can finally show my mom something and she won't think that I just, I'm unemployed.
Gotcha. I'm glad you did establish that timeline too, because in my mind I was panicking. I'm like, wait, when I looked up limited run, I was seeing a lot of Vita stuff in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I have 2 limited run prints that I keep in my classroom for students to see of,
Nice.
of SteamWorld Heist, I believe. And I think Breach and Clear is the other one, I think, which is really, really cool. When you guys are going to make prints, how is that process like? Are you having to discuss box art, as it were, because this is now going to have a box, which is different per se than a digital storefront piece of art? How do you guys select and go through that process with the companies?
So we'll usually ask for their artists and their team to kind of give us like a dump, which is a weird thing to say out loud, of all their key art and images that they have. And we kind of go through those and say like, which ones of these would work for cover art? And, in the rare case that they don't have anything available, our art team can either improve something that they have, or we can contract one of our artists that we kind of keep in a stable that can design new cover art. So, I mean, that's basically about it. They just work with our art team. Our art director, Shaddy, has a really good team, and they do a good job at like figuring out which art's going to work best.
So it might be interesting to talk about how big a company Limited Run is. How many people work for you guys? What type of departments do you have? You have an art team, which I think might surprise some people. Of course, those in the know would not be, but how big is Limited Run?
So we have 50 employees now.
Yeah.
It started off as just Douglas and I doing almost everything. And it's kind of crazy how much we managed to accomplish through that. Like, we really didn't expand out and hire a lot of people until maybe like 2.5, 3 years ago. Like the first 2 years were primarily like me doing all the art, all of the submissions for code, all of the website stuff. And then Douglas and I kind of sharing the load on marketing or whatever. But basically every hat that could be worn was like worn by me or Douglas or shared between the two of us, which is kind of insane. And eventually it just started being too much to handle, and we would find people to take over the tasks that we hated. So like I hated doing taxes and financial stuff. Like that's the worst. So one of our first hires was somebody to handle taxes, financial stuff, so that like no more accounting stuff would have to be on my shoulders. And then Douglas really hated having to try to keep up with customer support and also keep up with business development. So
and shipping.
Yeah. So customer support was the next thing that we kind of figured out how to get other people on for, and shipping as well was another thing. It was like clear we needed to, get additional help there. So right now I would say the majority of our 50 member team is marketing and shipping, or not marketing and shipping, customer support and shipping. So I think we've got 6 people in customer support, maybe like 14 or 15 in shipping. And shipping would include our inventory people. So anybody that's like managing the warehouse and like keeping things clear, pulling stock for the people shipping. And then marketing is 3 people. And art, I think we have 5 people now. And art is, it's not just laying out the packaging, but it's also like working with the manufacturers and suppliers of everything that goes in our collector's edition. So like they're supplying art and guidance for like, metal objects, statues, figures, keychains, pins, posters, trading cards, basically anything you can imagine. Like they're handling the process of getting those things to exist. So like they still wear a surprising number of hats. And then there's a lot of stuff that Douglas and I still do, a lot of business development, creative tasks, coming up with the products we're pursuing and, finding new games to bring on board. So we've grown a lot, from 2 people to 50. It's kind of insane.
That is kind of insane. And Douglas, what kind of hat are you wearing right now as opposed to where you were, say, at the beginning of the company in 2015?
My primary responsibilities now are business development, so I handle a lot of like the boring contract stuff and just searching out new games and scouting. I also manage our support and marketing team. Thankfully, both of those self-manage themselves for the most part at this point. We have very competent people in those places. So I would say it's mainly just working with developers and just kind of assisting Josh on anything else he needs me to do. A lot of our stuff overlaps now, and like Josh was saying, we've grown so much now that we were able to offload most of the tasks that we hated. So it's been good. Yeah, and then going to conventions, like that's something, one day if we're able to again, that was I would go to pretty much all of them, and then the big ones Josh and I would tag team, like E3 and GDC, which we're both sorely missing.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can certainly imagine for a lot of reasons that we're missing that. And before we get into kind of the logistics and whatnot of the company, I'm curious, do you guys enjoy your roles at Limited Run now more than the beginning and that kind of upstart mentality and vibe? I mean, certainly you've been able to offload some of the responsibilities that you're not too keen on, but do you enjoy the roles now more or less from when you started?
I can definitely say I enjoy mine more. I did not enjoy shipping, and I did not enjoy doing support roles. Those are things that I wasn't necessarily bad at, but it was just so much to do, and I felt like so many of my other tasks were like not getting done. So it feels better to have more focus now.
Sure. Josh, how about you?
Yeah, I would say that I kind of enjoy what I'm doing now more than before. When we first started, I mean, I think there was one of the things that I enjoyed more at the start was being able to be more involved in our community. So when we were a smaller company, it was much easier to ensure that every single person that reached out to us could get an answer or some kind of comment on their posts. And, a lot of people felt very involved with us early on because there were a lot fewer people for us to interact with overall. It would be maybe, I think we had like 2,000 followers on Twitter. So if somebody sent us a message, like we would be able to see it and respond to it with pretty good timeliness. But now with 207,000 followers and constant questions on Twitter, it's like impossible to stay on top of all of it. Like there's no way to guarantee that we're responding to everybody. And I think a lot of the people that were with us early on, like they feel a little burned now because we can't give them the attention that we used to. And I regret that a little bit. I miss being kind of able to be that active, but I do love that now I can really focus on the stuff that I enjoy the most, which is product development, like coming up with new boxed products and ideas for our collector's editions and things like that. Like that's what I really enjoy the most, like the creative aspects of this. And it was really hard to juggle that before with so many other things, especially like trying to handle financial stuff or trying to handle inventory problems or making sure things were getting shipped out. Like it's so much better to be able to focus on the aspects that I really enjoy.
Sure. And we had a lot of people write in with questions for you guys. And one of them, Mr. Kyle Stevenson, he asked, or rather I should say, he said, as a massive fan of Limited Run and what they're doing to preserve physical media, what's the process for deciding what those games are to make a physical edition of, and do the publishers come to you or vice versa? But I'd like to add on to that question of how you decide. Also, how do you guys decide what goes into that physical edition and those special editions. You mentioned keychains, statues, and whatnot. How are you going about deciding what you want to include in certain games?
Yeah, so I mean, to answer some of the initial questions real quick, a lot of the developers now are kind of coming to us, but there are several games where we have to chase them down. Like if they're dream games that we want to sign, like Scott Pilgrim, for example, that was our biggest release that we've ever had. We've been chasing that game for about 5 years now, basically since we started. And a lot of factors kind of led to us getting that, but a lot of that was us kind of chasing it down. But I would say 70% of our releases these days are people who have come to us, and that's a nice position to be in. When it comes to deciding what we want to sign for our lineup, it's a combination of kind of what's popular and what we like personally. So a lot of games that are being signed right now are games that Douglas really likes, because he's kind of driving a lot of what gets added to our lineup. So people are going to see a lot of horror games and things like that show up because Douglas is a big horror game fan. So like right now we've got Ghosts, which we're backing on Kickstarter. That's kind of a passion project of Douglas's that he's been working on for about a year now. For the collector's edition stuff, like what goes in them, that's a process that kind of changes depending on each game. Like we can't put the same amount of effort into every collector's edition, but if it's a game we're like super excited about, one of the things we'll do is we'll kind of let everybody at the company have a voice. So they will go on a Google Doc and, kind of write out their ideas, say like, it'd be cool if we did this. And we'll collect ideas from everyone and then figure out what's most feasible. So we did that for Scott Pilgrim, and we ended up getting a document that was maybe 7 or 8 pages long. And there were every idea imaginable on there, ranging from very easy to do, like keychains, to extremely difficult to do. I can't remember. I think we wanted to do like a color change figure or something like that, that would change based on temperature or whatever. I don't remember specifically what it was, but I think it was Scott. It was a Scott Pilgrim figure, and it would change to Nega Scott depending on how cold it was.
That's cool.
But we kind of narrowed down our list of contents by trying to figure out like what the theme of the box is. So I kind of started on figuring out like what's the box that it comes in going to look like. And then from there, we can kind of narrow down what the contents inside of it are, because you want the contents inside to kind of fit the theme of the outer box. So otherwise, it would just be kind of a hodgepodge of random physical things. It'd just be like, just it would feel disparate and not really feel like a cool addition. So for Scott Pilgrim, we came up with the idea of doing a hard instrument case, because Scott's in a rock band, and we wanted to do something that felt like a roadie case that he would travel around in, keep his gear in for when they go to shows. And the idea from there was let's add contents in there that kind of support that idea. So drumsticks, guitar picks, and it had this feature where you open the box and there's a pop-up scene of Scott and his band playing on stage, and there's actual working lights and sound. So when you open the box, you hear an Anamanaguchi song start playing, and the lights are kind of pulsating with the music, lighting up the different elements of this pop-up stage. And you can kind of put your finger underneath the stage and, fold it back up. And underneath that's where all the special edition contents are. So we really just kind of figure out what the best box will be, and then from there we figure out what contents will support that box theme.
That sounds so much fun. Like so much fun. Do you guys get to play with a lot of stuff that maybe doesn't make it to retail?
Idea wise, yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff that goes on the drawing board and then either doesn't work out, or developers don't like it for one reason or another, or it's too expensive to do.
One of the things that Josh really wants to do that is one of the weirdest items in here is there's a Jurassic World cereal box with a built-in screen that he wanted to kind of do for a game, for like Dragon's Lair. Or his original idea, when you open it, the screen would be there and play the startup intro, but that was really expensive.
Yeah, so the Dragon's Lair box has this slide-out tray on it, and I wanted it so that when you slide out the tray, a screen that's integrated in the box plays the intro video for Dragon's Lair, because I just thought that would be the coolest thing ever. because I have this stupid Frosted Flakes box. When you open the flap, it starts playing this behind the scenes video of Jurassic World.
And it's a rechargeable cereal box. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's really weird to think that sometimes I need to plug my cereal box in to charge it. But it's a thing that exists, and we had the ability to put a screen into the Dragon's Lair thing, but it was just way too expensive. And at the end of the day, it's like, that's a really cool concept, but I don't know how many people would actually be like, yeah, I'll pay $50 extra for a box that has a screen on it. Like, it has to be like a really special game, I think, to like convince people that that's worth it. And then people have to like kind of see the product and execution to like understand like the value of that screen, because otherwise it's just like a box with a screen. It sounds so wasteful.
Well, you mentioned price, and that was going to be one of my upcoming questions. How much does the cost of the retail unit factor into what you guys choose to do and not do? Because certainly there are very expensive collector's editions out there. Certainly there are some that are far more affordable. How do you guys go about deciding that stuff?
So, I mean, we have to be conscious of what people will pay for something. Like, we know, like, if we try to charge $500 for a collector's edition, it really limits the pool of people that can buy that thing. And we don't necessarily want to do that. Like, we want to find the right balance between price tag and popularity for the franchise. So for like Scott Pilgrim, our collector's edition was I think 130 or 150, and that's kind of like the right price for like a top end collector's edition for me. Like, that just feels right, because if you buy like a AAA game like a Call of Duty or Last of Us Part 2, like the collector's editions, the high end ones, like they usually top out around $200. Like that's the consumer expectation for a collector's edition, is like that price tag. And anything higher than that, you really start limiting who's going to be able to get it. I know THQ occasionally does like really expensive things that go beyond that, like their SpongeBob thing that was like $400. But we really like to be below $200 for our collector's editions, and we have to kind of price out the contents to make sure it supports a price tag around that. So if we have an idea like putting a screen into the box, like that's going to eat like a huge portion of the available costs that we have for this thing. So we can't really pursue every crazy idea we have, but occasionally we'll have something like, we did a box for Lumines, which is a puzzle game, and it's very music focused. So we made the box have light and sound, and each box for that collector's edition cost $80 to make. And we didn't do that many of them, because at the end of the day, like Lumines is a very niche franchise. So we really had to think like, we're not going to be able to sell too many of these, like probably 1,000 tops. And we really didn't make any extra money on the collector's edition, because we also knew we couldn't really charge that much for it. Like, I think we ended up selling it for like maybe $100. I think that might have been $150. And I mean, it came with the game, the $80 box, the pin, a poster, and it was like, basically at the end of the day, like every unit of that made us about the same amount that we were getting from the standard game itself. So,
but also had the vinyl, I think.
Yeah, the vinyl was in there. But at the end of the day, like the developers cared more about making something cool than they did about making money. So that kind of factors into it sometimes. Like if the developers are like, we don't care about making money, we just want to make like a cool thing that we'll be like proud to own. Like in that case, we really don't have to worry too much about costs. It's more about just doing something cool. But for the most part, like almost all of our partners, they want to make money. So it's very rare when we have somebody, they're like, I don't care about making money, just make the coolest thing you possibly can.
Gotcha. Which would make, I mean, it makes sense. And I'm sure you would find those altruistic approaches from time to time. And I do want to talk a bit about the conversations that you have with the console makers that you guys represent and whatnot. But I am curious about one last aspect of game preservation. I've heard in previous interviews that you guys have done, running into concerns or issues with source code being lost. And we've seen that happen all the way up in AAA developments for remasters and remakes of late. Ninja Gaiden comes to mind. How do you guys kind of deal with those particular hurdles as you find them? So with source code and stuff.
Yeah. So we typically, when we've re-released a retro game, we usually look at it from two approaches, because it's really rare to find a developer that actually cared enough to save their source code. It's certainly happens, but the ones that we have been directly involved with, like Night Trap, for example, like that was a full ground up rebuild of that game. Like none of the original source code was used. And that tends to be kind of the preferred route, I think, right now, is most people are either reverse engineering and then rebuilding games from the ground up in new engines, or where they're going the route like we did for Shantae on Game Boy Color, which we ported to Switch and PS4. Or we haven't ported it to PS4 yet, but we're trying to build out our engine to PS4. The route that we took with that, because that's another case where the source code doesn't exist anymore, is we just built our own emulation engine that we can drop the game into and then very easily export it for these other platforms. So we're working on making our emulation engine support PlayStation, Switch, Xbox, PC, and as many platforms as possible, so we can very easily like take these classic games and re-release them for modern platforms. Because we just noticed that like our partners that we work with, they're sitting on these huge libraries of past games that they're doing nothing with, because the expense is usually too high to pay somebody else to do these ports. So we kind of developed this model where we can step in and help them re-release these games for no cost. And we think that's going to kind of do a lot for availability for a lot of these classic games. And that's kind of a big initiative that we're pushing right now, is this emulation engine to get a lot of these classic games back out there again, whether they have source code or not, because we'll just be able to use the games as they already exist, the images from the discs or the ROMs from the cartridges.
I love the idea of game preservation coming in that physical form, but also the idea that you're building the tech to allow some of that older stuff to spring forward onto modern consoles. And when you said modern consoles, you mentioned PS4, Xbox, Switch. The question that kind of jumps to my mind is, as these modern consoles, as it were, are building into a new generation of gaming, and backward and forward compatibility are playing a factor here, do you guys have to change your game plan at all to adjust for PlayStation 5 or Series SX, anything else coming out with their initiatives? Does that change your game plan, as it were?
So I'll let Douglas respond. He hasn't talked in a while.
No, you can get this one, man. I'll get the next one.
We haven't had to change.
You guys dodging that.
We haven't had to change too much. PS5, at the end of the day, like, they're shipping far more of those with discs, with the disc drive, than they are without. And with Xbox in particular, the Series X versus the Series S, it's just like, I think the Series S is no disc, right? Like, I can't remember, but most people are not opting for it because it just doesn't have the power of the Series X. So I think the majority of people, they're still going to have disc drives. So at least in the immediate future, it's not concerning to us, and it's just kind of business as usual. Like, we can still keep releasing discs as we were. And on PS5, all of our PS4 games are going to work on there. So there's no real major worry that, like, we have to shift or change any strategies. Like, we just keep going forward as planned.
That's really cool. Now tell me, as you guys are having to talk to console makers, because when I peruse the Limited Run website, I'm seeing a lot of PlayStation, a lot of Switch, no Xbox, which I'm sure we'll get to in a moment. But what types of conversations do you guys have with the console makers, as it were? Like, I don't know. I'm completely ignorant here. What do you guys say when you say, hey, we want to make a Vita game in the Vita's heyday, or hey, we want to make a PlayStation 4 or Switch game?
I mean, for that stuff, we have registered accounts and account managers for each of the platforms. So, I mean, it's all very, by the book, and honestly kind of boring at the end of the day. We just kind of submit a request and say, like, hey, we have this game, we have publishing rights to it, and then they usually just approve it, and that's it. Getting on them was a little bit harder, just because you kind of had to, like, for like Nintendo, they were very big on curating who was going to do Switch stuff initially, so we kind of had to petition, why it was important for us to be on there. And PlayStation, like Josh was saying earlier, like, that was our start, and we were kind of already on there as publishers. And any publisher can just do physical if they want, but it's not an easy process. So that's definitely a thing like that was the big learning curve on working with the platforms, is like learning the process and like talking with your account manager and talking with like the people that actually physically produce it and how to get all that arranged. Xbox is interesting because we've been having those conversations for years and trying to get on there, because there's a lot of people at Xbox that have been fighting for us, and it's just such a unique thing for them that they're not used to. And we're making really good progress, and we're officially Xbox partners, so we're hoping to have more to reveal soon.
Is that a recent thing? Again, I'm coming from a place of ignorance, so I'm just asking for the education. Is that a recent thing?
It happened last year that we were officially brought on, but it's taken a really long time just to get like paperwork going, because Xbox wants us to do certain things first, and they had to basically build a team to do this. So yeah, it's fairly recent. Ironically though, the talks have been going on since like we freaking started, and it was almost a recurring joke for me at like every convention. They would like sit down and have lunch with me, and they'd just be like, "Yeah, we can't wait to get you on Xbox." And then after like the third year of doing that, I was like, really though? Like, so
are you sure?
And like we would be talking to people that were super excited, and then they would get transferred to a new department or leave, and we're like, oh man, where do we go now? And I even asked Phil Spencer himself at a party once, and he knew who we were, and he was like, I'm all for it because I know the fans want it. So yeah, it sounds like it's something that's definitely feasible, and we're working really hard to do. We also have to make sure we pick games. We feel like the Xbox is a whole different audience. We want to make sure we pick games that are really going to appeal to them.
Do you have games in mind that appeal?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of our old partners are all Xbox companies now. So, I mean, we'd love to be able to work with them.
I mean, we work with Bethesda all the time, and Microsoft just bought Bethesda, and it's really weird that like the Doom releases we've done are not on Xbox. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And we work with Double Fine pretty often. We've released a few of their games, so to not have those as Xbox releases physically, it's also weird because they're another first party company now. So I think one of our big initial initiatives on Xbox will be to kind of correct those things where like we work with these first party Xbox companies but haven't released their games physically. So those will probably be some of the first physical Xbox games we do. But then there's plenty of partners we have that have released games that we've released on other platforms on Xbox that it would be nice to get kind of Xbox caught up to speed there. So we're going to kind of go through our back catalog and see what games have we released on Switch and PS4 that were really successful that would also warrant release on Xbox. And then as far as Xbox exclusive stuff goes, like I'd love to work with Double Fine to do like Massive Chalice, which was a really cool strategy game that they developed for Xbox. And there are some other Xbox exclusives as well that I'd eventually like to look at. So fingers crossed, hopefully everything gets sorted out and we can really start going full steam ahead with Xbox soon.
Certainly so, and I'm speculating, and I'm wondering why there would be hesitance at first. I mean, the companies, of course, are very different. One is a software company primarily. It happens to make some hardware, and Sony seems to be a consumer electronics where they happen to make software. At least on the outside looking in, I'm wondering if perhaps that's where some of the hiccups were. But do you expect that because of these acquisitions Xbox has made with partners you've worked with, that will perhaps motivate or remotivate some of those talks to happen a little bit faster?
I think so. I think that's definitely a thing. I think one of the reasons why it's just been hard to get things going on Xbox is I really think that Microsoft's just had a stronger internal push for going digital, like between Game Pass, between the fact that the Xbox One was originally announced as an all-digital console. Like, I just don't think that there's a huge amount of internal initiative at the company to continue to push physical media. Like, I don't think anybody like hates it or whatever, but I think they understand that the future in game distribution it's going to be, at least for the mainstream, it's going to be streaming. It's going to be Game Pass and probably xCloud. Like, just anytime you want to play a game, you just choose it and boom, it's like Netflix or whatever. Like, that's the future. So I don't think they're putting a whole lot of manpower or effort into their physical distribution strategies. It felt like nobody at Microsoft that we would talk to during the first like 2 or 3 years even knew who at the company like even handled retail stuff. Like half the time, like I got this feeling that it was just some random guy out in the middle of a field or whatever, like, you know, in the basement, you know, some guy like in the furthest corner of Microsoft just kind of, you know, chugging away at these retail releases independent of everyone else, because it really felt like nobody knew what was going on there or knew who was handling any of that.
Yeah, their culture is definitely very much about what's happening in the future. I mean, like Game Pass is honestly a great value, and I use it a lot. And like the company as a whole just seems to be kind of focusing on future stuff. And like we show up and we're like, hey, let's do that thing that's kind of dying, even though, you know, you don't really want to do that. And they're just like, wait, what? And like Josh said, the guy who's probably in charge of physical, like probably like he didn't know who that was, and he probably worked in a really random spot, and people, it was probably like Office Space where like they forgot they were paying him. And like
he's down there with his red stapler.
Yeah, still getting paychecks. But we I don't know, they're like Josh said, like they're not opposed to it, and they seem really excited to get started. And it definitely, I would say it definitely helped that a lot of our partners ended up becoming Xbox companies. They were kind of the ones that helped push and get things moving faster. So we're really excited, and we both love Xbox, so it's nice to see, you know, us being on all the platforms finally.
I can tell you that while I am almost exclusively digital myself, and I mean, obviously because we're doing a video interview at this point, you can see behind me there's quite a few physical things, and I've got plenty of display cases. There are a lot of games I would love to celebrate with limited run type stuff. You know, I mean, that's just a way to celebrate fandom in a lot of ways. Guys, here's a silly question for you. It's maybe not even specific to limited run. What are you playing right now? What are you enjoying right now in your personal time?
I'm randomly playing the Dead Rising games. I keep on randomly felt like playing those again, but I keep going back to Dead Rising 3, and it's a shame that like to me that was the peak of it, and it stayed on Xbox. I feel like that series should have, for that one, been ported at some point, like years later. And
Douglas, we had Shelby Young, who's the voice actress for that game, on the show not too long ago, and she would be thrilled to know that people are liking her game.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
And
I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that's mainly what I've been playing. I've been playing I was also playing the new Nier game, the new /old Nier game. And then I just randomly was like, I just feel like killing zombies. And before that, I was going through some weird Red Dead Redemption phase again, where I was replaying the first game again.
That's cool. That's cool. How about you, Josh?
I'm mostly between games right now. I just beat Bravely Default 2 a couple weeks ago, and I was gonna start playing It Takes Two with my wife, the new co-op game from EA Hazelight. But we haven't really started it yet, so I'm just kind of, you know, she's replaying all the Dishonored games right now, so I'm just kind of sitting there building. I started building Gundam models recently. I hadn't built them for, I don't know, like 20 years. I feel like the last time I built one was like 2001, but I needed something to like distract me from like not looking at my phone or looking at social media or whatever. So I was like, let me buy because I didn't realize that they still made like $10 Gundam model kits. I thought they had all gone up to be like $40. I was like, I'm not paying $40 for a 5-inch figure or whatever. But they're still like $10 if you find the right store. So I bought a bunch, and I've just been building those while she plays Dishonored. But I will occasionally still play Phantasy Star Online 2. That's the game that I played the most of during last year. You know, I would say that kind of got me through the pandemic. Ended up playing like 400 hours of that or something ridiculous in 2020. But I've kind of run out of interesting things to do in the game. So I feel like every time I boot it up, I play it for like 10 minutes and then find myself asking, you know, what am I actually going to do? I've done everything interesting, and then I turn it off.
Yeah, we're really stoked for the new one.
New Genesis. When that comes out, I mean, that'll just revive the addiction, I think.
So for a couple of weeks, Limited Run might not be printing anything. You're gonna be on hold a little bit, that kind of thing.
Entirely possible.
I will share briefly with the listeners. We're chatting via video right now, and their backgrounds are filled with so many awesome, cool models, toys, collector's editions, statues, whatever it is. I feel like I need to get the Phil Spencer like spyglass and like look in there and try and see all these little Easter eggs and nuggets there. Your backgrounds look awesome, guys.
Thank you.
Do you have any favorites in there?
I mean, mine's all like Dragon Ball, so the whole thing.
That's crazy. Wow. Okay. So that's like an entire wall of Dragon Ball figures. Very cool.
Yeah. Mine is just everything and anything that I can get that is something that I love. So there's Star Wars stuff, there's Transformers, there's a small soldiers figure behind me.
Mhm.
Just everything that meant something to me as a kid that I've found throughout the years as a collector. It's on my shelves. There's just an insane amount of stuff. So
that's awesome. Well, Josh Fairhurst, Douglas Bogart of Limited Run Games, thank you guys for joining me. Please let listeners know what to look forward to for Limited Run, and if they're interested in checking out some Limited Run products, where they should be going.
Yeah, check us out on limitedrungames.com. I know this is an Xbox thing, but right now we still got the Doom Classic Trilogy up. We got Star Wars Republic Commando, Bug Fables. Sam & Max is going on sale this Friday whenever this goes live. And yeah, we got a lot of cool stuff, and we got even more cool stuff coming up. I think we're doing a teaser soon for one of our big releases, so keep an eye out. For the company, at Limited Run Games on Twitter, and then for us, it's at Limited Run Doug and at Limited Run Josh.